Now, in June 2014, there were new elections in Syria, and Assad actually let someone else stand for the first time. But even so, Assad won 89% of the vote. Now, Iran and Russia say that was a fair vote. The EU and the US says that the elections were a farce. You can make your own mind up about whether you agree with the EU and the US or Iran and Russia as to whether those elections were fair or not. Now, in Iraq, IS or Daesh take control of the key city of Mosul in the north and Tikrit and seize large quantities of government weapons. Just remember, the army had gone home. And Daesh say that they are ready to march and on Baghdad and seize it. The Americans start airstrikes in Iraq to try and deal with the advance of Daesh in Iraq. Of course, now the Americans are launching airstrikes in support of the Iraqi government. Daesh also receives a flood of volunteers from Europe. The Turkish government does nothing to stop the flow of extremists going to support Daesh. The Americans also at this time decide that they will support the Kurds. With American help, by August, they control vast swathes of northern Syria and Iraq. The Americans also start to ship arms to the FSA, who are fighting the Russian-backed Assad forces. At this stage, the FSA then win a string of stunning victories, but as it appears that they are on the verge of victory in Syria, it looks like the FSA will overcome Assad and topple his government. There is a problem with the FSA. The FSA is, of course, formed up of numerous factions. They're united by their hatred of Assad, but they don't agree on what kind of Syria they want to create. Some want a new military dictatorship, normally led by themselves. Others want a democratic Syria. Some want a Muslim Syria. There's a whole swathe of different groups that make up the FSA. And in October 2014, it seemed that they were on the verge of victory. And with victory in sight, they started to ask who was actually going to emerge as the victors. And so they fall out, and the FSA collapse into their own civil war, with the FSA fighting other units of the FSA without having first finished off Assad's government. And you have, in particular, a fight between the Sunni Muslim volunteers and the Western-backed regular army units, like, for example, the 30th Division, which the West was very keen to support, the regular army units that had mutinied against Assad's government. The Western-backed regular army units lost that civil war badly, and by June, the FSA is led by the Al-Nusra, or the Army of Conquest. With the FSA in crisis, IS sees Palmyra, which is, of course, one of the great wonders of the area, that beautiful ancient city, a World Heritage Site, which they go on to destroy. In June 2015, IS launches a series of offensives. And just give you some idea of how complicated this situation is now. Remember what is now a multi-sided civil war. The Turks help IS where IS are fighting against the Kurds, because the Turks are also fighting against the Kurds. And so where IS are fighting against Kurdish forces, then the Turks help them with airstrikes. But where IS are not fighting against the Kurds, then the Turks will fight against IS. At this stage, Australia sends forces to help the Americans against IS in this area. In September 2015, there is massive Russian military support for Assad, including the sailing of warships past Britain into the Mediterranean. Assad's forces advance towards Aleppo. In Iraq, Iraqi government forces slowly start to push IS forces back towards Mosul. In November 2015, there were the Paris attacks. The British and French start to bomb IS in Syria as well as in Iraq. Turkey shot down a Russian military aircraft, while Assad has, in Syria, managed to all but destroy the fragmented FSA forces. In July 2016, Iraqi forces reached Mosul. In August of 2016, Turkey now invades Syria to try, they claim, and fight IS, but also to fight against the Kurds. It has to be said they are mostly fighting against the Kurds, and Turkey had long wanted northern Syrian territory. For those of you who watched my 1939 talk, you'll know that they tried to take northern Syria in the negotiations about joining the Second World War in 1939. And they seized this area in August 2016. In September 2016, the Americans bomb Assad's forces, and Assad's forces, in revenge, attack United Nations aid convoys going to help the refugees and civilians in this crisis. In February 2017, there's another brief Assad-Israeli conflict. And in April 2017, the Syrian government uses poison gas again against the FSA. In revenge, the Americans bomb Assad's forces, but Russia accuses the Americans of breaking international law. In June 2017, the Iraqi army retakes the key city of Mosul after nearly a year of bitter fighting. You now have the government of Trump, and President Trump halts American support for the FSA to the delight of Russia. Trump claims that the FSA has clearly lost, and that the Americans have no right to interfere in Syrian affairs, that it's an internal Syrian business, that the FSA are, after all, rebelling against the Syrian government. Trump's government claims that American support is just lengthening the crisis and risking a global war with the Russians, and so withdraws his support for the FSA. In September 2017, Russia supports Assad's offensive against IS or Daesh. In October 2017, the Kurds take Raqqa from IS, which had been the capital of Daesh's caliphate. In November 2017, China sends troops to Syria to help Assad's government, as well as Russian military support. So maybe Trump had a point that it would be dangerous to support the FSA, or maybe that wouldn't have happened if he'd have carried on supporting the FSA. It's hard to know. In December 2017, Russia announced that IS or Daesh is beaten in Syria, and Russia establishes permanent military bases in Syria. Of course, very useful within striking distance of the Suez Canal, and handy to help try and control the Straits of the Dardanelles. Strategically a vital area, which is why, of course, the British maintain military bases in Cyprus for much the same reason. In January 2018, the Turks invade Syria again to attack the Kurds. By March, they had seized a vast swathe of territory, including the town of Afrin, and were flying Turkish flags over the town in what has now become a war of military conquest. And in April 2018, Assad used sarin and chlorine gas against rebels in Douma. The US failed to condemn Assad's government due to vetoes from Russia and China, so the Americans, the British and the French launched airstrikes on the 14th of April 2018. And so there you have the struggle in Syria. Iraq, of course, is still a democratic state, fighting to control the insurgency in the north. In Syria, Assad's forces are in the ascendancy, and the West will have to come to terms with the fact that they supported a failed rebellion against his government. And the world will have to come to terms with the horrors that were unleashed in the wars in Syria. Now, I hope that helps to make sense of what is a complex and multi-sided struggle, a return, tragically, to great power politics of the Americans and the Russians competing for power. The Turks seizing land that they claim should always have been theirs. The additional complication of Israel always arising on Middle Eastern politics. But I hope that makes sense, and I will see you all soon for another episode of Howl's Histories. Stay safe.